Hey guys, it's Bradley with the Insurance Guys podcast. Scott, before we start today's episode, tell everyone who our sponsor is.
Hey guys, when you buy leads, you're digging through the same pile of leads as everyone else. You never know if you're getting to them first or if they've already been picked through by your competitors. The best leads are the leads that you generate yourself. But where do you start? With Colex Dates, you can build your pipeline with hyper-local prospects that you generate, such as targeting the neighbors of your best customers so you can discover more customers just like them. Or you can pick an area of town where you want to start doing business because you know your city better than anyone else. And since Colex Dates provides multiple contact points like landlines, cell phones, and email addresses, you don't have to worry about how to get a hold of your ideal customer. So whether you're calling, running an email campaign, dropping a ringless voicemail, or uploading your list as a custom audience on Facebook, we've got you covered. Generating your own leads can seem daunting, but when you put Colex Dates to work for you, you take control and can target your ideal prospects and have more conversations right on time. Colex Dates. Let's start generating leads together.
That was a great job, Scott. The guys over at Colex Dates have put something together really cool for only Insurance Guys podcast listeners. Head over to colexdates.com/Insurance Guys podcast. Fill your information out and they will contact you with a very special offer. That's colexdates.com/Insurance Guys podcast.
Insurance agents from around the world, welcome to the Insurance Guys podcast. My name is Scott Howell, your fearless host and leader, insurance agency owner and insurance evangelist with I Protect Insurance and Financial Services based out of Huntsville, Alabama. And before we get started on today's episode, please help me welcome. He is a 6'3" sophomore from Saraland, Alabama, Parade First Team All-American, Rivals 5-star recruit. He is a fantastic insurance agent and a great American. Please stand and welcome the incomparable Mr. Bradley Flowers. How are you, Bradley?
I'm great, Scott. How are you today?
Man, I am doing fan-supertastic, guys. I am proud to be in Mobile, Alabama. I am fired up. I am ready to go. We have got a podcast guest today, guys. Whatever you're doing, pull over on the side of the road. If you're driving, you need to listen to this podcast today. This is going to be one of those episodes that is completely out of the box, but I think will be extremely interesting. I think it's going to be something everybody will want to hear. I will guarantee you one thing. When you get out of this podcast, there will be a couple of nuggets of information you're going to want to write down. And as I always say, write that shit down. Before we get started,
get some shirts that say that.
Write that shit down?
Yeah.
Exactly. So before we get started, let me say this. Our mission on this podcast is to help insurance agents any way we can. Hiring, firing, accounting, software, agency management systems, you name it, sales, anything you can think of, we're going to do a podcast on it. We are blessed and honored to have our guest on today, guys. He is a big deal. I'm in love with him. He is also a beautiful, beautiful man. Our podcast guest today, he works and is the partner, one of the partners at Jag Insurance in Miami, Florida. He lives in Miami. He is the host of the transition podcast, Life After Sports. He is married to the beautiful Giselle, and they have two beautiful babies, Olivia and Sean. He played baseball at Florida International University, FIU. And also, here it comes, guys. You ready? Don't wreck your car. He also played baseball in the Chicago White Sox farm system. So he's carried over the passion, discipline, and determination that made him a professional athlete to the insurance industry. These traits have led him to securing coverage for assets within the multifamily industry, commercial facilities, and condo associations throughout the entire southeastern region. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the podcast the other incomparable Mr. Fernie Alvarez. How are you, Fernie?
I am doing great. You guys are awesome, man.
Man, we are fired up about having you on the podcast today. You know, I told you off air, and I'm going to tell you on air what I would love to do, because I know you've got a million different stories about how you got to where you are sitting right now today. I want you to get in the passenger seat of my DeLorean, and I'm going to take you back in time for just a moment And I'm not just going to take you back in time to when you got started in the insurance business. I want you to go back all the way to being drafted out of college and tell our audience what it was like to play professional baseball, and then carry us forward into how you got into the insurance business and up to today.
Dude, that's awesome, man. You guys are so good. You got me nervous, man.
No, don't be nervous, man.
Hey, man, you should be in studio with him.
No, man. There is no. I promise you, there is no reason to be nervous.
We had an in studio guest today, Andrew Martin. That episode will be out by the time this one's out. And Scott got so hyped up in the intro that Andrew went for like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, we had about an hour and 45-minute podcast when he was in here. It was incredible.
I love the energy, guys. And again, likewise, man, I feel blessed to be on. And you guys, obviously, I'm really excited to have met Bradley and form this relationship. So
absolutely,
kudos to that. So a little bit about my baseball background. I played baseball. My college career started at Dodge City Community College in Kansas.
Mm-hmm.
I went there straight out of high school. I graduated from a local high school in Miami, Florida called Coral Park Senior High School.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
So I went there. I went to play JUCO. Was actually drafted by the White Sox in the 42nd round that year. So I was what they called a draft and follow, and that means they reserve your rights for a year, and then on the second year you can either sign with them or be eligible for the draft again. So I came back for my sophomore year and decided that I wanted to go to school. Ended up signing a scholarship to play at FIU. Had actually verbally committed to play at K-State University, but FIU was really up and coming. That year in 2001, they were one game away from Omaha. So I just felt that as a hometown kid, it'd be the right thing just to come back and play in Miami and represent our city. So I did that. And then my senior year in 2004, I was drafted again in the 16th round by the Chicago White Sox.
Hey, Fernie, before you keep going, what position did you play?
I was an outfielder.
Okay. All right.
So, yeah, man, that's my story. So I ended up signing with the White Sox in 04.
And 16th round?
16th round.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I went to go play with the in short season in Great Falls, Montana.
And tell everybody what it's like to play minor league baseball. I know it's not the show, obviously.
It's not for me. For me personally, it was awesome. It was great. I'll be honest with you, Bradley. It's not funner than college baseball, okay? Because the minor league system it's pretty much it's a business,
right?
And everybody kind of plays on an individual basis, so the whole team chemistry is kind of lost,
right?
Until you kind of get to the playoffs. But if you do get to the playoffs, it was fun because I happened to know a lot of guys that were in the big leagues at that time. So I was training with these guys here in Miami in the off season. Spring training was really probably my best experience. I mean, walking into a spring training facility in Tucson, Arizona, really being in that atmosphere was something I'll never forget, and was really, really, really thankful for, man. That's the highlight. If I have taken it back, that's actually the highlight of my minor league experience was spring training.
Hey, I've got a statistic I want you to either confirm or deny for me.
Go ahead.
Somebody told me the other day, not too terribly long ago, I guess it's been a month ago, that 65% of the major league rosters are made up of Puerto Rican, Cuban, and Dominican Republican players. Is that correct? Would you believe that, or is that wrong?
Dude, you know what? If I had to guess today, I would probably say it's 50-50.
Yeah.
If it's more of Latin America right now, I would not be surprised, to be honest with you.
Right. I knew it was really 50-50. High. Yeah, I knew it was high.
It's high, dude. And let me tell you, that's one of the biggest culture shocks when you get to spring training is, being a Division I athlete and playing in a major conference and being in a regional and whatnot. Your mind, you thinking you're only playing against guys that are in the country, but when you walk into spring training and you see guys from the Dominican Republic, from Korea, from Puerto Rico, from all over the world, you're like, oh my God, you're competing against the world.
Right.
So that was actually a real eye opener for me, man.
Oh, I bet. So I was going to say, so take us from we're playing minor league baseball. I assume at some period of time, at some point, that kind of plays itself out, right? I mean, you at some point you get ready to go out into the world and do something besides play baseball. How did you kind of fall into the insurance industry?
So once I'm done playing baseball, I opened up a baseball academy in Miami, believe it or not.
Really?
So I did. So I opened up a baseball academy called Dream Team Baseball Academy. And I did that because I really didn't know what the hell I was going to do with my life. I thought for a minute I was going to become an agent and realized that my bank account wouldn't let me do that. So,
Right.
So, you have to front a lot of money for these guys. So I said, okay, well, I'll open up a baseball academy and kind of stay in my comfort zone and do what I do. I opened up this baseball academy, and within 90 days, I had over 60 kids. Built a lot of relationships with these parents and whatnot. Now, Bradley, for me, because I had so much love for the game, the only thing that never felt natural for me, dude, was charging these young kids to play the game. And there was always this part of me, man, where I just wanted to do it for free, but I really I couldn't do it because I needed to make money.
You got to pay your bills. Yeah.
Yeah, man. So that was a very uncomfortable situation for me at that time. But to kind of speed things up, how I get into insurance is because I opened up this baseball academy. I'm throwing batting practice and I'm doing private lessons for this young kid, and his dad and I had built this relationship, and I never knew what he did, but he drove a nice Porsche, and he was a humble dude. He was a defensive back at the University of Southern Illinois, so he was an athlete, and him and I always talked about different stuff. And I finally asked him, I said, what do you do? He goes, oh, I'm in the insurance business. And I said, oh, okay, cool. I didn't think much of it. And the next week, I'm throwing batting practice again. I'm giving his son a private lesson. And he comes up to me. He says, man, I've been thinking about you for a week. And I said, what do you got? And he says, I figured, man, that if I'm an ex-athlete and I see the drive and passion you have into what you're doing, but, something tells me that you want to go out and explore something and make money and build a life for yourself, which these were conversations that we had in the past. He said, if you put the same passion and energy that you're putting into Dream Team, I think you can be real successful in business one day. And I said, well, what do you think I should do? He goes, I think you should go into insurance. And I was like, oh, shit. And I had no idea. So this gentleman was at that time the largest, I want to say, top 3 producers for State Farm in America. This is a guy who was writing over 200 cars a month, new business. And he had a family friend who had an independent and had a kind of an opening. So I went there and worked for that little agency and literally got my 440 and was a receptionist, was an account executive, was a producer, you name it, I was it, man. So I started just like in baseball. I started in T-ball, went to coach pitch, went to kid pitch, went to high school baseball, went to college. Throughout this whole journey of my career, I started at the bottom to get to where I'm at, which is why I understand this business so well, is because I started from processing a file to processing finance agreements to managing software programs and getting apps and submissions out, and I've done it all.
Talk a little bit about, Fernie, some of the similarities, from a competitive standpoint, from a behind the scenes preparation standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint that you see from professional sports into the world of business, entrepreneurship, and even on a minute level into insurance.
If I understand what you're asking me, I say this a lot. It's something I mentioned in my podcast quite a bit, Bradley, is I believe the mind of an athlete is very special. And I mean that from the bottom of my heart. An athlete is always in a vulnerable place. And sometimes, even the best athletes are the most vulnerable ones. When you're an athlete and you're in a field and you're constantly failing, you're constantly getting your ass kicked, and you've got to be constantly preparing to become a better player, those characteristics really carry over into life and into business. And when you're a kid and you start at a young age and you have a coach who's pushing you, a coach who's sometimes saying you're not getting the job done, from the age of 5 and up,
Mm-hmm.
in my opinion, it's a huge attribute that you carry, an advantage you have that you carry into the business world, because a lot of times, if you haven't been exposed to getting your ass kicked or being in high pressure situations, and I'll give you an example. I mean, let's say you're a college baseball player with up to bat with the bases loaded and the winning run on second base, and you've got 10,000 people at LSU watching you in a game, dude. That's a big fucking deal, And it's the same thing. It's the same adrenaline passion that you have when you're about to close $1 million deal or whatever it is that you're going to do in your business in the insurance world. Dude, that rush, that preparation that you're putting into that opportunity is amazing.
Yeah.
And I believe in preparing relentlessly and anticipating. I think athletes anticipate great. As a baseball player, you have to be able to anticipate to become a good hitter.
Mm-hmm.
So
yeah, and I think with me, I can speak personally. I didn't play anywhere close to professional sports. I played college golf. When I first started in insurance, literally a buddy of mine just came to my office that I was working at and said, "Look, if you can sell what you're selling now with cell phones, you can sell insurance." And I started selling insurance just because I thought it would be a little bit better money. And then I realized, oh wait, I get to compete against other agents. This is competitive, and that was really what kept me in it and forced me to learn it, was the competitive drive from playing competitive golf. And I was sort of at the point where I was past college golf, but I was still playing competitively, some, small level professional tournaments, and I was kind of on the downslide a little bit to where I didn't have the time to maintain the level. And so I sort of was able to channel my competitive fire from one thing to the other. And guess what? The harder I worked, the more money I made. So it was like this domino effect that led me, and that's sort of what kept me into insurance, which allowed me to fall in love with it.
Absolutely, man. I mean, insurance is a very competitive industry. There's no doubt about it. And it's no coincidence that if you look across the country, at least a lot of guys that I know that are top producers in their firms, they're all ex-athletes. The fact that you play college golf and that you're a successful insurance agent is no coincidence, Bradley. You've been in that range and spent hours to figure out how to hit a golf ball in 4 strokes. That takes a lot of work, and I can guarantee you failed a lot.
Oh,
right?
yeah.
So,
well, in golf, you're gonna fail more in golf than you are. Than you are in any other sport, Well,
look, I mean, we can go back and forth. I'll say baseball's the hardest sport because you got a round bat and a round ball coming at you.
In golf, you have to play your foul balls. I've always wanted to say that.
So you know what? You took the words out of my mouth. I don't need to say it. So I'm a frustrated golfer, but I fell in love with golf as well because it's so difficult. There's no room for error. There is no such thing as a foul ball. So every stroke counts. You've got to manage that course. You've got to anticipate a shot. You've got to read. And golf taught me one thing, man. You really got to stay composed.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
In baseball, once you can let some emotions out, and you can in golf too, but you really got to take a deep breath sometimes and compose yourself. And when I walk into a meeting and I'm fired up, I mean, I'm a high energy guy. I've got to be able to compose myself because I just want to take over the room sometimes because I see it's my passion, man. I just know what I can bring to the table or my firm. And I can't help it sometimes. And I tell my wife all the time, it's like, it's my best gift and my worst enemy sometimes, man, because I really got to take a deep breath and slow the game down sometimes.
Right. And I was a terrible baseball player. I don't really mean that golf is harder, but I had people that had played baseball with me in the past in Little League and stuff like that. Freaking guy is playing college golf. Like, well, I guess when the ball's not moving, it's easier for him to hit it, kind of thing. So
it's not.
So Fernie, when you got into the insurance industry and you started your career, what was the hardest thing that you struggled with on a day-to-day basis? Just when you first got into it the first couple of years?
You know what? I really struggled with walking up to people that I knew that I wanted them to give me an opportunity.
Right.
To take away the, hey, you're Fernie the baseball guy. I love it. I mean, I still, now on the flip side, I can have that conversation because I've already, I've been in this business for 11 years and I've proven that I was going to I was going to stay committed to this. But I think a lot of times people saw me and they were probably thinking in the back of their mind, he'll probably just do this, and a year later he'll be doing something else.
Right.
What they didn't realize was the same commitment I put into baseball, I was going to put into this business. I'm all in, man. And I said to myself, once I got into this, I said, well, if it took me 21 years to become a good baseball player, it's probably going to take me 21 years to become a good insurance agent.
Right.
So thank God I was able to cut that in half.
Right.
But I'm always learning, man. I will say I don't know everything. I'm surrounded, but I always want to be the dumbest guy in the room. But I have become really good at what I do, not only because I know my product, but because of my mindset is so different and is so relentless that I will literally beat another agent to death I'm just not going to go away. I'm going to play. If I'm on a deal, Bradley, I'm going to take the game into the ninth inning until last pitch. You can fucking guarantee that.
Yeah, I believe you.
So how long was it from the time you started with that independent agency to the time that you got with Doug and your other partner? I believe his name is Lewis.
Lewis, yes.
Yeah, and how long was it before you guys formed a partnership?
Good question.
So, dude, after 2 years, guess what? All of a sudden, this guy is starting to write a bunch of homes, and I was doing very well, but I realized that the agency I was at kind of was capped, and due to some regulations, because people were involved with captives and they could, just a lot of different stuff, I realized that I was capped.
Right.
So what I did was I went up to this gentleman who actually got my career started. I said, hey, I see all these high-rise structures that I think we can insure, and I want to do it, but we don't have access to certain markets. And he kind of sat down with me and said, hey, this is where we want to play in, and this is what we'll kind of do, but I don't want to hold you back. If you see something different, I want you to take an opportunity. And at that time, I wanted to get an appointment with a certain company. And I joined what's called the Florida Association of Independent Agents, FAIA. So I go to this convention in Orlando, and I see Doug, and I hadn't seen Doug in a couple of years. And Doug said, dude, what are you doing here? I'm like, man, I'm studying insurance. He's like, I thought you were playing baseball with the White Sox. He's like, no, man, it's been a while. And he goes, man, you gotta come meet with me tonight. So I went, I met with Doug and his dad, and when they were at Weinstein Jones. And long story short, I was at this agency for 2 years. I go to this convention, and 2 weeks later, I joined Doug. Lewis and I had always maintained a relationship. I called Lewis. He was at another agency. I'm like, hey, I think we need to get together. I want you to come over here. And we just had a couple conversations. And then Lewis joined us about a month later. All of a sudden, Doug, Lewis, and I are working for Doug's father. And you got three athletes on the ground, running hard in South Florida.
Sure, that was an interesting dynamic.
Oh, absolutely.
It was, man. It's funny, dude. I always say God works in mysterious ways.
Right. Absolutely.
And, I don't find this to be a coincidence at all. To this day, I walk in and I still look at Doug and Lewis. I'm like, how did this whole thing happen, man?
Yeah, I know, man.
Who owns this place? Like, it's so weird.
Well, the chances of all three of you guys going to college together, knowing each other, and also add the fact that you're three completely different individuals. You end up in business together. The partnership works, and you guys are successful on the level that you're successful. And you guys can downplay it all you want, but you guys are massively successful in my mind. Is nothing but a God thing. You're absolutely right.
It is, Bradley, man. I am not embarrassed to say, I will give all glory to God.
That's right.
We've done very well, man. And the crazy part about us is that we've just scratched the surface. Like I told Doug and Lewis, I said, you know what? In 2018, we got to the big leagues, kind of like what they call a September call-up. I can tell you now, we're in the big leagues, and now I've always said it's much easier to get to the big leagues than it is to stay there. Absolutely. Now the challenge is, how long can we stay there,
right?
Yeah,
and sustain this. But I feel that if we continue to have fun and play the sport of insurance, to me, it's a sport. It's not a business. I play a game, and we don't take ourselves too serious, and we put our employees, our culture, and the program ahead of us, we're going to succeed. Because one of the things, a lot of people do say that Doug, Lewis, and I are totally different, and we are. But there's one thing that we do have in common that I don't think people recognize, because you really got to get to know us to see it, is we are all humble at heart.
I agree. No, I agree 100%.
You understand? So like, we all have our own little, like Doug's got his cockiness and his own swag, and Lewis and I've got mine. But in our heart of hearts, we're humble individuals. We're not perfect by all means. And that comes from the playing field. That started as young kids on a field, when you putting on a uniform and knowing that you played for the program. You didn't play for yourself.
Right.
For me, if there was a man on second base, it wasn't about me hitting a jack. It was about me moving the runner over and putting him in scoring position. And that's the same concept that we use here. It's, what do we got to do to put our players in the best position to succeed?
Yep, absolutely.
Every day. It's a game of chess.
Talk a little bit about your podcast. Talk about the mission of your podcast. Talk about what you're trying to do. I know, and Scott knows, the unintended consequences of starting a podcast. I don't know how far down the food chain you are in terms of how many episodes you've done, but talk about, the podcast, how it came about, and some of the things that have happened since.
I've only shot 2 episodes. My podcast started about 2 months ago. When I was done playing baseball, I went through a real transition in my life, and I started to suffer from severe anxiety attacks. And I had no idea what was happening to me. I was going through a big identity crisis. I mean, my world in some way came crumbling down, because, I was an athlete. I had structure. I knew what I had to do every day. Get up in the morning, go lift weights, come back home, get yourself a protein shake, get a nap in, go back to the gym, practice at 1, batting practice at 5, game at 7. And I did that for years, man. And I knew my off season, lifting and getting better. And when I was done playing baseball, the beautiful thing about my career was I was never released by the Chicago White Sox. I actually retired. And so I was not only able to get drafted twice, but thank God I was able to end my own career, because I just knew that it was time to move on.
There's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah. I quote unquote was never fired. So that's something I also get to carry, which is awesome, man. It gave me a lot of peace. And when I came into what I call the real world, after about 3 weeks, man, I just started to feel really lost. And so I go through this whole cycle in my life of suffering from this. And I talk to you guys about this now. I'm not embarrassed at all, because this is what leads to this podcast is I went through this whole identity crisis, and I didn't know what was wrong with me. I was trying so hard. I was back in an environment at home at that time that really wasn't that healthy for a lot of different reasons. And long story short, I still was able to continue to do my baseball academy and get into insurance, but behind the scenes, I mean, Doug and Lewis knew I was going through this. I was really struggling, man, and I just couldn't tell what was wrong with me. And one day, I fell onto my knees, and I literally prayed to God, and I said, God, I don't know what I'm going through. So I found a therapist. I started to read up on athletes who, is common. Like, I just started doing all this research. And it's very common for athletes who are done playing sports, whether they were at the big league level, NBA or NFL, they do face a transition. I mean, think about it, dude. Imagine if you're, Michael Jordan shooting, playing in front of 50,000 people all night and doing everything you want, and from one day to the next is gone. You miss that rush and that high. I went through this whole period, this whole transition, and back then I had just met my girlfriend, who was not my wife, and I would always tell her, I said, I don't know why I'm going through this, but the day that I'm anchored, I'm going to share my story. And I would say that, and I don't even know why I would say that. I can't pinpoint it, but I guess, I have a lot of faith in God, and I felt that I was being used to be an instrument, maybe one day to use my little story,
Absolutely.
Even if it's just to help one person, man. So I told myself, I'm not going to suffer in vain. And so then anyhow, I always said that. And then I go through, I get all this help. I found Christ in my life, and I start to heal, and I start to understand a lot of different things in my life. And then when we hired VaynerMedia, I'm having a conversation with Gary, and Gary asked me about my background. So I I'm very passionate about this whole thing. He's like, he looked at me and goes, do you have a podcast? I'm like, what's a podcast? Dude, 3 months ago, I'm like, what's a fucking podcast? And he's like, are you serious? I'm like, I don't even have fucking Instagram. He's like, you've got to share your story. And I'm like, but, and then I said, well, why am I going to share my, I'm like, share my story. I'm like, damn it, I've always wanted to do that, but how do you do that? He's like, a podcast. And you're going to name it The Transition. And
so he named that?
He gave me the name The Transition. He did. Yeah, I'm not taking credit for it. He did. I only added The Transition, and I added life after sports.
Right.
Because I wanted people to understand where I was coming from.
Right. It sort of adds a little bit of clarity.
Clarity, exactly. And that's how this whole thing later. So all of a sudden, a guy who's never been on social media, I was the anti-social media guy because I thought it was people trying to flaunt their things and whatnot. All of a sudden, to 60 to 90 days ago, I've got a little following. I've got about 5,000 people on LinkedIn. A guy who literally didn't have LinkedIn 3 months ago. And I realized that I needed to utilize this podcast to tell my story and find the masses. Now, what's funny is when I first shot my podcast, you guys have no idea how vulnerable I was. Or even when I would put up a picture.
I know that feeling, dude. You feel like your heart's outside of your body, don't you?
Oh, Bradley, let me tell you something. Talk about getting uncomfortable and having to live what I'm preaching here. I had to get uncomfortable. Like, I got to take a selfie and I got to do this. And it's funny, after a couple times, I did it. And I'm not going to lie to you. What helped me was I started to receive some DMs with people thanking me on just one little episode.
Yep.
And I'm like, dude, thank you. And I'm like, oh my God, like this is actually happening. And then I had my brother-in-law do this logo. And then all of a sudden I have a podcast room. And all of a sudden I'm on iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. And, I don't know that I don't know that a lot of people have listened to it or not, but I'm like, oh my God, like 90 days ago, I didn't even know how I was going to do this. Now I'm on iTunes, Spotify, and SoundCloud. I'm on the phone with Bradley Flowers, who has an amazing podcast. So even as I'm talking to you now, you guys have no idea how in my heart, man, it's like answered prayers for me, man, in so many different ways. Like it's almost like I'm still soaking this whole thing in, man. Like I'm actually vulnerable to this day, man. I feel so blessed. And more importantly, I feel like I found the sport again. Like I told my wife last night, I'm like, man, I'm involved in baseball again, but I'm not, but from a different perspective, I
love that.
Like, and I've had high schools reach out to me that want to talk to their players. I've got 2 major league guys that want to come in and share their story on the Transition podcast. So it's really cool. I have no idea where this is going to take me. I want nothing in return other than the fact that if you're out there and you're listening and you're an athlete in transition or whatever you're at, my whole purpose is to let you know that, number 1, your best days are ahead of you. Number 2, God loves you. And if you as an athlete can use the same characteristics and dig deep and put them into business, you're going to be successful and you're going to find your purpose again.
I love it. Hey, Fernie, this is Scott.
What's up, Scott?
Can I offer you up just a very small piece of advice? Take it for what it's worth. I always say, you know what free advice is worth. I want you to do 2 things. You don't have to do it, but I'm going to highly encourage you to do it. I think that your podcast, because of the topic and the fact that there are so many athletes out there, not just pro athletes, but if you're the 85th guy at the University of Alabama that's been playing football for 4 years, and you graduate and there is no pro football for you, you run out of eligibility, even those kind of people are going to want to listen to that.
I'm reaching out to everybody, and right. You're right on the money. That's who I'm reaching out to.
Well, the piece of advice I wanted to offer you, it's a twofold piece of advice. The number one thing I would tell you is this: be consistent with your podcast, and I think Bradley would agree with this. Try. Don't say you're going to try, because to me, when people say they're going to try to do something, that means they're not going to do it. But tell yourself, I'm going to release a new podcast every Wednesday at noon, or every Wednesday in general, okay? And the second piece of advice I have for you, do not stop that podcast for any reason other than if the Russians bomb us in a nuclear holocaust and there's no United States of America anymore, do not stop that podcast for 50 episodes.
Yep. I
Now,
would agree with that.
After 50, tell yourself, I'm going to release a podcast every week on this day and be consistent, okay? And then tell yourself, I will not stop this podcast until we get to episode 50. And after that, we'll make some decisions after that.
And that was a piece of advice that Johnny Gwynn, our producer, gave us, Fernie, is at least make yourself a commitment to X amount of, whether it's a month or a week or every day, whatever that commitment is, and get to 50.
Right.
Something magical happens at that 50th episode.
That's right.
Where you've kind of found your consistent fan base, so to speak, for lack of a better term, and things really start taking off. And we just hit 50.
Right.
As many as we've done, it feels like we've done 1 million.
Right.
We just hit 50. But from our experience, my experience, the key to all this is the consistency and just absolutely getting after it.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Yeah, and the thing that he has that we don't have is all it would take, and he has these kind of connections because I know the people he knows in professional baseball. All it would take is him having, 2 or 3 or maybe even one Major League Baseball player or a famous athlete coming on to talk about their transition.
Or Gary.
Or any of that. Yeah, Gary Vaynerchuk, any of that. And he goes one day from, 5,000 people listening to 500,000 people listening.
Yeah.
Because he has those kind of contexts. I don't know any professional athletes. I wish I could get Tom Brady on the podcast.
Look, let me ask you a question, Fernie. You said the podcast was
guys. I wrote all this down, by the way. So thank you so much.
You said Gary gave you the idea for the podcast. So Scott, what they have in their office is they have a podcast studio, which I'm assuming you're in right now. Podcast studio in their office.
Right.
That is, it's cool. It's like a fishbowl glass. It's got a view in their office that I believe, right, Fernie, anyone in the community can use or any referral partners can use.
What we did was we opened up the podcast group to local business leaders that want to share their story at no cost. We have a guy who handles that, Juan Lopez.
Great guy. Met him.
Awesome, dude. And people, I put people in contact with him. He schedules them, and it's just a way of bringing the community together, of entrepreneurs or whoever you are. As long as you're a good person and want to come in, and you know what, at the same time, that allows us to build relationships that we would have never had.
Yeah. So, question: did Gary give you the idea for that?
He did.
Yep, I knew that because the reason I say that is one of the other Vayner Mentors participants is not too far from here in Panama City, Florida, the furniture store. And his idea to them was to create a co-working space / coffee shop inside their store to use as a way to sort of advertise the furniture.
Wow.
And so when I walked in your office, I think it was Doug said, "Yeah, we have podcast studio here. Anybody in the community can use it." I said to myself, that is 100% Gary Vaynerchuk.
That's amazing.
It's taking your business and finding what value you can add to the community that's different from your business to attract people to your business. Right?
That is correct.
Yep.
So, Fernie, before we jump off this podcast, I want to ask you one question, and then we're going to jump off here. If there's one piece of advice that you could give to the 250,000 insurance agents that listen to this podcast, a lot of whom are associate agents, some are principal agents, independents, captive, what's the one piece of advice that you would give those people to, motivate them today to go out and sell insurance for their family and make money for the world? Family? Yeah.
I'm gonna keep it real practical, guys. Okay.
All right.
You got to work your ass off and prepare relentlessly.
Yep.
If you and believe in yourself, believe in your company, in your organization, and the people that work for you or your teammates. If you do that, I believe that nothing bad comes out of sacrifice. And if you do that, we're in a beautiful. I always say insurance is the best kept secret in corporate America. Right? We're in a very rewarding industry. If you do that, you're going to be successful and you're going to live a very good and healthy financial life. I truly believe that.
I think that's the perfect spot to end it, Scott.
Fernie, I love you.
I love you too, man.
I have great news for you. I just informed Doug about, an hour ago, I guess. And I will tell you that I am coming to see you.
That is awesome.
Yeah, I'm coming down end of March, early April. Your agency, this is Scott speaking now, but your agency, I do one agency visit a year to an agency outside of my area, and I'm bringing my division manager for commercial insurance in my agency. His name is Clinton Orr. He grew up in Jupiter, Florida.
Okay,
but we're coming down to your office for 2 days, and we're going to keep our damn mouth shut and try to learn as much as we can from you guys while we're down there. But I can't tell you how much I appreciate you being on this podcast today and how much it means to me and to Bradley as well.
Absolutely. And I really enjoyed our time together down in Miami. I told Scott, I met with you guys, had an amazing visit there, had dinner with Doug and Michael McCormick, Taylor Dobby, and a couple of executives from a company we all know. And I told Scott, I said, I was good. I was ready to go home. The conference hadn't even started yet. I was like, I'm good. I've gotten enough valuable information out of this trip, and a large part was at your agency. So what we want to do for you, and I haven't even talked to Scott about this, is everybody that's listening to this podcast, every single person listening to this podcast right now, if you've gotten any value at all from this podcast or any of the other, I think 64 episodes we've done, stop what you're doing, turn this off, go to search, type the transition, life after sports, and subscribe to Fernie's podcast and send me a screenshot to show me that you actually did it. And
what are they getting? I appreciate that, man.
I don't know what they're going to get, but they'll get something. Show Fernie some love.
But I think we're probably, my beautiful wife designed these T-shirts. I think we're about to order about 250 of these bad boys. So, we'll see what happens there.
Send me screenshots, guys. It doesn't matter what platform it's on, iTunes, Spotify, SoundCloud.
Yeah,
let's roll.
And Fernie, this podcast will be released in about what?
A little while. We got some in the tank.
Probably a month or so. So when it comes out, don't be surprised on a random Tuesday at 4:00 if you pick up quite a bit of listenership on your podcast, man. But
I appreciate it, guys. Thank you so much. Man.
No problem.
And thank you for the advice about the 50. I'm going to keep going hard.
Don't stop till you get to 50. And I think once you get to 50, you're going to be like, I'm doing 5,000 of these bad boys.
Yeah.
So guys, listen, I'm going to go ahead and close this thing out. Guys, as I tell you every week, rewards come from action, not discussion. Get your ass out from behind that desk and go out into the big bad world and sell insurance. Make money for your husband, make money for your wife, make money for your family, make money for your kids, and write good business for the agencies that you represent. Write good business for the companies that you represent. Bradley Flowers, I love you.
Thanks, buddy. Thanks, Fernie.
Hey, see you guys. Hey, you're listening to the Insurance Guys podcast, and we'll be back here real soon. Take care. Thanks for listening to the Insurance Guys podcast. If you need to know more about me or you need to get in touch with Scott, you can always reach me at theinsuranceguyonline.com or email me at iprotectins@gmail.com. And if you need to get in touch with Mr. Bradley Flowers, go to bradleyflowersinsurance.com or email him at bradley@saralandinsurance.com. Guys, we love you. Thank you so much for listening. We look forward to being with you again real soon on the next episode of The Insurance Guys. Take care.